Today on Turd's Tech Tips, I'm going to show you how to do a leak down test on a 4-stroke motorcycle. Leak down tests are awesome troubleshooting guides in kind of diagnosing issues with the health of a 4-stroke engine. It's in effect a compression test, head gasket checker, piston ring checker, a valve seat tester, all rolled into one little unit. You may have heard this referred to as a differential pressure test before as well. It's the same thing. There are different kinds of these things you can buy. I decided to build my own because it's much cheaper than purchasing one. It's a very simple setup. You can get all these parts at your hardware store. I've got a regulator here, just a simple regulator. This gauge is indicating pressure coming from our whatever I have this set to, pressure coming from our air compressor. So you want gauges that go up to at least 100 psi. The ones I have happen to go to 160. But you use a regulator, that'll bring this needle up, and the air travels through here. And in this fitting right here, I have a little orifice that's 40 thou big. Just a tiny little hole, this size. What that's going to do is it's going to restrict the flow of the air through here, and leaks will show up on this gauge. When we hook this up, this is going to be air going into the cylinder, and this is going to be the one you're reading pressure in the cylinder. And then you do a math equation from there to determine your leak rate percentage. Some of these gauges you could buy, like the Motion Pro ones, it's just one single gauge and it shows you a leak percentage. It's effectively doing the exact same thing we're doing here. It's just I did it a lot cheaper than a Motion Pro one. So we've got an 07 YZ450. I've got the spark plug removed. I threaded in my adapter with my hose end. Gonna plug the tester into here. I've got the radiator cap off to check for bubbles. And you need to come over. The engine needs to be at top dead center on the compression stroke. And to find that, come to this side of the bike, take both the covers off, and there's a tick mark on the flywheel. Now you could be on the tick mark, but it won't be on the top dead center of the compression stroke. To know that you're on the compression stroke, you could either take the valve cover off and then have a look at the lobes and make sure they're both not pushing down on the valves, or the simple way is to, with your hose installed, cover this just ever so slightly with your thumb and kick the bike over very slowly until you get air pushing out of here. When you get air pushing out of here, you know you're on the compression stroke. When the air stops, then you know it's around top dead center. And then the kicker will get you close, but then you come back to this side of the bike, check for your tick marks, and then you can use the 17 millimeter nut right here to fine tune, index exactly where those marks are. So the kicker will get you close with just feeling this for air coming out. It'll get you on the compression stroke. And if you go past it, whatever, just kick it through another cycle until you find that this is building pressure. You'll hear it hissing out of there, you'll feel it pushing your thumb off. So once top dead center is found, then we get a breaker bar is more ideal than a ratchet. You have to make sure you're going the right way with the ratchet. But I'm gonna set this on the nut, and the engine's gonna wanna spin that way. So I have it set up accordingly. If you're exactly on the very top of the stroke, like exactly on top dead center, oftentimes it won't even rotate, but you should always have something kind of holding it, either yourself or have a buddy holding it from the engine spinning. Because you think about it, we are pressurizing the cylinder in here with 80 pounds of air. So it's gonna wanna spin the engine, and you're gonna wanna be careful. Back in my days of working on piston pounder aircraft, you would always need a buddy to hold the propeller for you at top dead center once you found the cylinder you're working on. But you have to remember the things, some of these engines, the bore is 6 inches plus, right? So that's a massive slug with 80 pounds per square inch on that 6-inch bore. It's a lot of force, so it's nothing to mess around with. If he were to let go, then the propeller could fling around and open you up pretty easily. Same idea here, albeit on a smaller scale, but there is still quite a bit of force when we put 80 pounds of pressure down on that piston. It's going to want to rotate this thing. And if you're still struggling to find top dead center, but you know you're close, what you could do is only crank the regulator up to, say, I don't know, 10, 20 psi, something small. We'll say 10 psi, and then work this by hand until you see this needle's going to start bouncing. But when this needle finally picks up and kind of matches what this one's saying, then you know that the valves should be closed in the head and you're in the correct spot. All right, we're set up, ready to go here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dial this into about 80 psi, and then we're going to check to see what number this gets, and while it's running we're going to go around the bike, check for leaks. Most common leak area is the actual piston and piston rings themselves. How you can tell is again, each bike is slightly different, but with these holes open here, we're going to hear hissing out of here. On some you could just remove the oil fill cap, some there's on the other side. It's all, the crankcase is kind of vented to this area down here, so whatever is getting onto the whatever air is getting by the piston is going to vent its way out through here, out some the crankcase vent hoses. If the head gasket were leaking, you'd see bubbles in the water. If your intake valves weren't seating all the way, you would hear some hissing coming out of your air filter. If your exhaust valves were leaking, you would hear it out your exhaust. Most common though is just the piston and rings that kind of get worn. Not to say the others can't happen, but this test will find those. Alright, let's boogie. Watch, as soon as I put pressure on it, this ratchet's going to move a little bit. The engine's going to want to is wanting to rotate. I've got it resting on the foot peg. See, both are rising. And there is 80 pounds right there. And we're showing about, I don't know, 61 over 80. Already I can tell that's a pretty substantial leak. That's about 25. I apologize about my tiny compressor. I need a bigger compressor to do this. But anyway, I don't know if you can pick that up on camera, but I can feel it shooting out of this hole. You can certainly hear it. I don't feel it, maybe slightly. Not too much though out of the exhaust. No bubbles. Head gasket's good. I can't really hear it coming out of here. It's so loud, escaping by the piston. As I was saying before the compressor interrupted me, this is about a 25% leak rate. So to find that number, you take the 60, you divide it by 80, which comes out to be 75%, and then it's just 100 minus 75, right? So there's just a 25% difference between these two numbers is what you're after, and that's pretty bad. Around 30% is kind of like really no good, but this isn't cause for like immediate concern, I would say, on this bike, but it's pretty clear the top end's worn. 5 to 10% is what you're shooting for. No engine's going to be absolutely airtight, perfect, but it should certainly be better than this. As my compressor winds down, that's all there is to it, guys. That's simple as that. It's a great diagnostic tool, and for dirt cheap, you can just build one yourself, and it'll save you a lot of hassle in the long run. And yeah, hope this video helped you. Have a good one.